We're Food Processing Skills Canada, FPSC. We support the food and beverage processing industry from coast to coast by helping build an exceptionally skilled workforce. The food industry is a major economic powerhouse in Canada, employing 1 in 8 Canadians and producing billions of dollars in goods every year. But with continued growth comes major regulatory and workforce challenges, including the need for tens of thousands of skilled workers by 2030. That's where FPSC comes in. We consistently secure funding and deliver forward-thinking programs, training, tools, and resources that help the industry grow. Our food skills library and self-paced e-learning make training easier and more effective. Our Food Cert program recognizes worker skills and strengthens food quality and safety across Canada. And our National Accreditation Program supports industry-aligned education through the Canadian National Occupational Standards. We also provide up-to-date labor market insights and help employers connect with new Canadians and Indigenous communities, creating stronger pathways into the sector. Our vision is simple: to educate, cultivate, and empower an exceptionally skilled workforce. Because when we set people up for success, we set Canada up for success too. Together, we feed Canada. Talk to us today.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for today from Export Development Canada. So please join me in welcoming Zeeshanali Fazal. I made sure that I know how to pronounce his name properly, from Export Development Canada, also known as EDC. EDC works with Canadian companies to help them grow internationally and navigate the opportunities and challenges of doing business in global markets. I'm sure most of you know who Export Development Canada is. Today, Zeeshan will share his insights that are especially relevant for food and beverage manufacturers considering export opportunities, market expansion, and the supports available to help Canadian businesses compete globally. We know that Canada's National New Food Security Strategy was launched week before last, I guess almost like a week ago now, which is kind of investing $3.2 billion over 10 years, into Canadian expansion of food domestically, which is needed. We need to process more food here in Canada, but the Prime Minister also wants us to diversify markets as well. So seeing how that is really going to work, but we need the labor to make that happen. We can expand and grow our companies and businesses, but what about the people? So we don't want to forget about that important part as well. So thank you to Zeeshan for being here. And we'd like to know if you can let us know a bit more about yourself and Export Development Canada.
Sure. Thank you, Jen, and for having me on this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here representing Export Development Canada, but also, of course, speaking specifically to the food and beverage exporters. So first of all, my name is Zeeshanali Fazal, a Regional Director and Agri-Food Lead for Quebec at EDC Export Development Canada. EDC is a foreign corporation, as many of you would know, and our goal is really to help Canadian companies export and grow internationally. So before I go any further, I think there's a couple of things that I want to level set over here. The first one, of course, is that what is an exporter? That's the biggest question that we get from companies. Well, do I qualify as an exporter or do I not qualify as an exporter? So when we're thinking about an exporter, there's 3 different ways of exporting. One is you're exporting directly into a foreign market, so you're selling to a foreign buyer. The second is you're selling to a Canadian company who then is onwards exporting. And then the third one is actually someone that is currently planning and is in the planning phase of exporting their products outside of Canada. So three different ways, either direct or indirect exporting, are companies that qualify for our support. What does EDC do, specifically in the food and bev industry? We could probably put this into three different buckets. One is helping Canadian companies manage risk. Second one is access capital to scale. And the third one is actually helping them connect to the right partner and opportunities globally. So that's, in a nutshell what EDC is. And I'm sure, Jen, you're going to have a lot of questions for me just to explore further into what and how we can continue supporting Canadian companies.
Wonderful. Okay, so there's a lot of different categories here. So I guess what is like the average size of business? Like when do you know a business is ready to begin to export? So maybe they were at the farmer's market selling their product and now they want to get into the retail space, say, or even ship their product abroad. Like there's a small chocolate company in Newfoundland. They're exporting globally, but there's probably like they think they have maybe 30, 40 employees or so, but they're exporting their product globally. So how would we go about doing that?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and I'll break it down into multiple different factors that we need to think about. It's what we call export readiness, right? Is a Canadian company ready to export? And what's important is the export readiness it's not just about the intent of a company to export. It's actually, at the end of the day, their ability to execute consistently and in a complex environment. So that is what defines export readiness. So if we really start, what we see as the first level is the operational readiness. Is the company able to make a great product, deliver it on a global scale reliably, at the quality that is required internationally, and also at the volume that is required to sell into the foreign market? So it's not just about, do I have sufficient people to do the manufacturing or processing of my food? It's also about scaling the production to meet the requirements around food and safety compliance, right? That's a very, very big factor that comes into play. And it's also about the mechanics of the product, because when you're exporting, so say you're shipping your products outside of Canada, not to the US, but elsewhere in the world, there's something known as packaging that varies from one country to the other, something known as shelf life that, you need to have a minimum shelf life, label requirements, which vary from one country to another, one state to another, one province to another, right? And then there's the logistics of getting your products outside of Canada as well. So there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration from an operational standpoint, because international buyers vary. They vary from their requirements, from the processing requirements, the shelf life, the quality, the certifications, everything varies. So that's from an operational perspective. You have to question yourself: am I, as a company, ready to take that challenge on or not? The second thing I say is the market strategy. Right? The market strategy is where we see usually the biggest gap. Is you don't have to be everywhere at once. You have to be very selective and strategic on the markets that you will be selecting as a company, because you have to question yourself: does my product fit in that market? Who is my target market and my target customer, and are they to be found in that country or in that region? And what are the channels that make the most sense, right? So there's always that value prop that you come in for that market, and does your value prop make sense and resonate with that market, with the target market that you're looking for? So that, again, is another category that, within the export readiness, you have to think about. The third one, I'd say, is the financial capacity of the company. Scaling is great, but scaling needs money, right? Because you're selling outside, the shipping times are much longer. You are
Hmm.
holding the receivables for a longer time, but you also have to do bigger batches, right? You can't just export small batches at one point in time because container limitations and whatnot. So you need to think about how you're going to get the financial capacity to sustain a much longer cash flow cycle,
Hmm.
which basically can put the company in a very difficult financial position if it is not taken into consideration right at the beginning, is to take that pressure onto your finances. And the fourth category I'd say is risk management. Going international means more risk, but more risk does not mean companies should shy away, right?
Right.
There are organizations, there are current corporations such as EDC that help manage those types of risks that we're taking on a global scale. So when you're looking at selling outside of Canada, there's a few risks that pop up right away, right? One of them is the customer risk. Who's your customer? It's not your neighbor. He's not found in your own country. He's not
Hmm.
found in your own city. So who is this customer? That's the first risk. The second risk you're looking at is the currency risk. You're selling in a different market in a different currency. So that can become a different challenge and
Yeah.
risk to manage. And the third one is the contractual risk, right? You are signing a contract with a foreign buyer. It is not the Canadian jurisdiction. It most likely will be a foreign jurisdiction, and those laws will apply to the contract because the buyers usually have the upper hand. So you have to think about how you will structure your transaction for a foreign market, taking into consideration the additional risks that come in it. And more risk equals more reward, right? But you
Hmm.
cannot just take risk and not manage it, right? So
Right.
to manage the risk accordingly so that you can be rewarded in consequence after once your contract is completed. So, the different stages, I really like to break it down because some companies think it's easy. I just want to export, right? And
Right.
you want to sell. And like, oh no, don't worry about it. I got this. But the
Hmm.
problem is you don't have it necessarily in your hand and under control unless you're able to really identify what are your key challenges and what you need to do to structure your company accordingly in order to sell in that foreign market. I'll pause over there because I spoke for a little
Wow.
bit.
Oh, these are great nuggets. Okay, so we have operational readiness was your number one point. So, you have to scale your product. We have food safety, compliance. You have to be consistent in a complex market. So, right there, that's one good bucket to try to have a checklist to see if you meet all those requirements. Two, you have market strategy. So, you don't have to be everywhere at once, which I love. So, really trying to pinpoint those markets. So, that's probably another question is, do you help businesses even identify markets, or is that a trade commissionaires thing, or do you have businesses that come to EDC and say, hey, we're looking for a certain product, could you match me up with the potential business or company? I'm not sure if that service actually exists as well to help with that. Then you mentioned, you have to know what your channels are. You have shelf life differences, packaging differences. So there's a lot to know there. Then your financial capacity. Things take longer cash flow cycles, so forth. Then you had risk management, which obviously is a big deal, and making sure you have the right insurance. And there's more risk, but there are potentially more rewards, and knowing who your customers are. So that was a great I think, summary of the different buckets and categories. So, do you help with exporting into different markets or helping them find their different channels at all?
Yeah. So let me, if you allow me, I'll probably want to speak a little bit about where we show up as EDC, right?
Hmm.
And then we can tackle the partners after. So I always like to talk about this as a journey. In anything that you would do in life, you always need to educate yourself. You need to do a little bit of research. You need to get comfortable. And once you're comfortable, you can start an execution,
Hmm.
and you're going to start executing on that plan. So exporting is not any different, right? Is step number one is you need to learn which market actually makes sense, right? Like I said, it's a very big risk when you just think because your competitor is selling into market A, that
Hmm.
is the market for you. But that competitor might have a different competitive edge than your product, which might not resonate to that market. So it's
Yeah.
very, very important for you to, step number one is educate yourself on the market.
Hmm.
We show up starting at the beginning of the journey. So this is where companies can approach EDC, and most of this, to be transparent, is also done online. Like we have an EDC.ca, a page which is my EDC, where companies can sign up free of charge. There's nothing that they need to worry about, from sharing information perspective, and they're able to go in and do some research about markets, better understand the market, better understand the challenges in that market, understand, get some insight, some practical tools, some guidance on how to go about that
Hmm.
market, cultural differences, language barriers, like all those types of things is what we call the knowledge at EDC. So our step number one is providing people and companies with that basic knowledge that they need. And then after that comes in, the next step. Once you have acquired knowledge and you have identified that you would like to sell into that market, you go ahead and do some research and get to know some partners, some financial institutions, depending on how far you want to go. In some situations, they're much larger, medium-sized enterprises, for example, that want to do an acquisition to enter a market. They don't want to just necessarily sell to that market, but they feel that being present in the local market is very important because
Hmm.
it helps come across some of the barriers from an operational perspective, from certifications perspective. So being present in the market is much easier. We can help channel through those as well as also looking for some buyers in that market and help understand who are the buyers, what are the key products that they're looking for, and how we can play into that specific market. So that is one bucket we help channel, right, from knowledge and from connection to the local partners and local buyers. The second thing that comes up is once a company actually starts to sell into that market, like I said, in expert readiness, you don't know who your buyer is. You've never had that experience, right? So the first thing that you really want to do is you want to secure yourself from a risk management perspective, is that you will get paid at the end.
Yeah.
It's something known as credit insurance, right? And that's where one of our key products comes into play is securing 90% of a potential loss that you can have in the future if you were to ship your product, sell, and to keep it on receivable, but never be able to collect those funds, right?
Hmm.
So that's step number one is for a buyer that you don't know, for a market that you don't know necessarily, and the fact that you've not built confidence over time. Credit insurance is step number one from a risk management perspective, I'd say, is very, very important. And we've done this over and over and over again for many
Hmm.
years. EDC is known for credit insurance a lot more. But the reality is we do so many more things that credit insurance
Right.
of course takes over because we help secure 90% of your loss. So
Yeah. I
everyone,
mean,
everyone's looking at that, right? How can I
of
minimize that
course.
in the future? So that I'd say is step number one, to enter a new market. And then, of course, with that comes the growth that comes in from an inventory perspective. You have to hold more inventory because you're scaling globally. You have more products that are in process. You have more products actually in the shipment phase, more products on shelf somewhere outside of Canada. So that puts a big weight on your working capital. Working capital is how do I finance my inventory? How do I finance my receivable and my receivables? And how do I ensure that I have sufficient that if ever I do get another larger contract, that I'm able to take that on without
Right.
having financial strain? So that's where our second line of solutions that comes into play is what we call the guarantees. So what we do is we will not be lending directly to the Canadian company in this case, right? It is always the financial institutions and the banks that will be continuing to do that. Where we come into play is we actually come in and we help the banks take on more risk. So when the
Mm.
bank says, I have way too many products outside of Canada sitting for this company, I have way too many receivables that are from foreign buyers, I'm not very comfortable with this risk. We are going to come in and we're going to give them a guarantee. A more concrete example, a company has a line of credit, more
Yeah.
receivables, more inventory rolling in the in the global market. The bank says, I'm not going to be able to give you an additional, amount of few $1 million for working capital. We guarantee the bank that, hey, bank, if ever you lose, we are ready to share your loss at a certain predetermined percentage. And
Okay.
the bank says, great, my loss is limited. I'm ready to give you more working capital. So it's not, of course, there's a lot of work that goes in preparing all of
Mhm.
this, but this is the way that we're going to help them get access to additional working capital. And I spoke already about access to foreign markets. Our role at EDC is we have 30 offices approximately across the world, right?
Mm.
And the goal for those offices is to get to know the foreign market, get to know the partners, get to know the foreign buyers, and bridge the connections between the Canadian exporters and the foreign importers. That's where it becomes very, very critical. If we want the Canadian companies to grow internationally, we need to be present in foreign markets, bring that market intelligence back into Canada so we're able to educate more Canadian companies on the opportunities globally and help them scale by bridging those connections to the foreign market.
Mm.
That's the third piece I'd say is other than the financial side of things, is where we help Canadian companies scale internationally.
Wow. Okay. Well, lot to unpack there. But you provide a lot of great services. But education, that's our area. I love that part. I think skills development in that whole area is huge because we kind of skipped over even the food safety preparedness that you need even to export your product, right? So that's a big hurdle on its own. And as we know, even with interprovincial trade now coming into play and so forth to kind of get up to the federal standards. So we've had quite a bit of experience in that area where we funded companies to, move along the food safety continuum, get certified, but it takes a lot of work. It's not easy. Like these steps sound like they're maybe quick to happen, but I think you're saying it's a journey, right? What about around the food safety area? What do you provide anything or any services there or any information around that?
So yeah, we do have information, of course, that is available online, right? When I said about my EDC, there's some information that is available over there that companies can leverage. But where we see opportunities, we work with our partners. So one of the things that we provide at EDC is in certain instances with information that we have on hand, we're able to do some research on a personalized basis, right? Is what is the key area that the company is struggling with, and let's see if we can do that type of research for them from a food safety perspective, and how we're going to be able to help them tackle that bucket. But again, we work a lot with our partners, right? Again, as I said, a Canadian company should not target all markets at once, right? Be very specific.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to do the same thing at EDC, right? We don't want to be everything for everyone. We want to
Right.
be where we're experts at and not do things that we're not experts at and, act to be experts. So we work a lot with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And
Mm-hmm.
we also work quite a bit with the Trade Commission Service, right? From a global
Right.
market perspective, TCS, of course, has a much larger presence than EDC
Mm-hmm.
for all known reasons. And Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, of course, are very specific, right? We should be proud to have something that type of a service where we have the government ministry that is actually helping better understand, better look at the challenges, bring about programs, and of course
Mm-hmm.
tackle the challenges that companies are facing in the local market. So from a food safety perspective, I'd say yes, we have some information, but we tend to work a lot with our partners in the market so that we can bring them on board and we can work collaboratively together to tackle what
Right.
each of us are doing better.
Yeah. Okay, great. Kevin, I'm going to let you ask a few questions here. Kevin Elder is FPSC's Government Relations and Labor Market Information Specialist, so he has some juicy questions for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm curious just about employers. If you have any sort of benchmarks, like I really enjoyed the way that you laid it out before with the different buckets where things go and sort of that step-by-step process to get there. But do you have sort of benchmarks where a company should get to, whether that's the volume of production to sort of demonstrate that operational capacity or a revenue target that they should be at before like, because I think I'm thinking of someone if they're based in Vancouver and the US is on their doorstep and the port's right there, that it's easier to think about exporting to US or Asia than it is to think about exporting east to Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And so is there a number where like somebody's at, oh, I've made $1 million in revenue, I'm ready to export now? Is there some benchmarks that are there that you're looking for companies to say you
Yeah.
haven't demonstrated to us that capacity yet?
Yeah. So, in all honesty, when you're working with larger foreign buyers, they will certainly do their assessment on whether, from an operational perspective, you are capable of supplying to them or not. Where we see the benchmark we usually see is about in around the $10 million mark. It's not from an employee perspective, but I'd say, once you're hitting the $10 million mark, foreign buyers are tend to be a lot more comfortable unless you're selling a niche product, which to begin with is, not easily sourced. And second is that, you will not scale to 10 million. You will always be less than 10 million, but because you have a niche product that cannot be found elsewhere, then of course you're one of the exporters that foreign buyers are taking. So I've seen this, a $10 million shift. If you look at, again, I go back to journey and continuums, right? I love looking at how companies evolve over time. And in my 16 years at EDC, what I've seen is you always see that these companies that in the lower, less than $10 million, that slowly at around the $8 to $9 million mark, start shifting their own operational structure, right? There is more people at the executive level, and they start looking at more strategic opportunities for growth. And that's where I say $10 million mark is usually where we start seeing a lot more pickup in exporting from these companies. Now, we do have, of course, companies that are in your 40, $50 million, I'd say, that I know of very, very well, that have decided they don't want to export because, for them, the local domestic market is great. And instead of going outside of Canada, they decided to go, further west and sell to the other provinces. So depends on really what their goal is. One thing that is very, very important is regardless of where a company stands from a revenue perspective or an employee perspective, building a plan is critical. Okay. That is where you need to do a self-assessment of am I ready? And there are partners that can help you do that, right? They're partners that are actually going to take your business and say, what do you need to now shift to the next level, right? And building a plan is very, very, very important. A lot of companies I have seen in the less than $10 million space, they say that, oh, I have a great opportunity. I have one buyer in, this country that has reached out to me and I'd like to export. But that's a one-off opportunity. And most of the time it's resulted in a nightmare because operationally you're not ready, right? You did not have the financial capability, and you did not have any knowledge of the market. So very, very important. One-off opportunities are great. They can be very lucrative, but you have to be sure that you build a plan around it before you even take that one-off opportunity.
Is there any information, like thinking about a company like that might have something where there's a buyer that approached them and tried to avoid the nightmare, if they're aware of that they don't have that operational capacity? At the beginning, you mentioned sort of who is an exporter, and there's that indirect channel.
Mhm.
Would you help someone that if they're at that third bucket of saying, I would like to export, I've been approached, I have an opportunity to get into macro in Venezuela or whatever, and so how do I get my product there? But I know I can't do it directly. Do you help
Mhm.
them find those Canadian like intermediary exporters as well?
Yeah, so we do have on our website actually we do have some of the the logistical partners, for example, that can be beneficial and useful. We do have some of the distributors, foreign distributors that have worked with some Canadian companies that have reached out to us as well. So we do have those partners. I'd say they're not it's not like a recommended partner by EDC, but it's companies that can go and leverage those companies that we've heard of, we've done business with two other companies that can possibly be a good fit. So yeah, and I always go back. It's an ecosystem. It's not just one EDC that will help, right? It's our ecosystem. When you reach out to EDC, you've not just reached out to EDC necessarily, because if we are not able to help you, for example, finding that intermediary that will be able to get your product through to the foreign market, we will do our research. We will work with AFC. We will work with TCS. We will do our research to and provincial partners as well in order for us to help you bring your product to the foreign market. That's beneficial to Canadian economy. That's what we want to do, right? So if we don't have the information, we do tend to refer to another partner that can help.
Great.
Excellent.
What do you see now as the strategic advantage for Canada exporting to the world? Like, do people see us as having high quality products? Canada's a brand that they trust? Like, what kind of feedback are you getting from around the
Yeah.
world?
So I'd say there are three things that, or maybe four. Sorry, I love my twos and fours, but there are three or four things I'd say that are very, very important. And how is Canada seen on the global market? The opportunity that we have right now is our reputation.
Okay.
Uh, our reputation globally with having the maple leaf sign on the product is helping Canadian companies sell quite a bit internationally. Okay. And in an environment like today, standards are quite high. The buyers are increasingly focused on reducing risk. They're looking at suppliers who can deliver consistently. They're looking at suppliers who, meet the regulatory requirements. And we're known, the Canadian companies, as being companies and suppliers of products across the world of high quality, meeting standards, and also at the same time ensuring that our product is delivered at the right time at the right location. So we are known for that, right? So that I'd say for sure, Jen, that it is something that we absolutely have to bank on and we need to work on. Now, if I look at what are the outlook at the moment for Canadian companies, there are four big things that we need to be mindful of. One, you mentioned it earlier, diversification.
Hmm.
US has been our biggest partner for a very, very long time. And, we are seeing companies that are interested in diversifying, but
Mm.
it doesn't mean that we're letting go of US,
Right.
right? It remains our market of priority. It remains a big market for growth. There is a growing population in the US, and they appreciate Canadian products a lot more than products from other countries in the world. So, for sure, there's no doubts that diversification plays into a favor of adding, not replacing
Hmm.
to the US. And that's where we need to think about. And why are we shifting? I mean, we've had a big shift towards Asia Pacific, right? And we are also now seeing a very big shift towards Europe. And these two shifts are really because those markets have a growing population. If you think about Asia Pacific, high growth as far as population is concerned, incomes are rising. They have demand for specific types of product that Canada is very good at: proteins, processed food, and ingredients, right? And if you think about this, we have all three of them. If you look at Europe, there's a demand for premium products, right? Where there are consistently higher standards that have to be met. Latin America, we're looking at food processing is expanding over there,
Hmm.
supply chains are evolving, and there's consolidation of big players. So they are looking at Canada to be one of the key suppliers for products or processed food, specifically into that market.
Isn't
So
the African market growing as well, from what
it
I
is growing. It
understand?
is growing.
Yeah.
Again, is we cannot focus everywhere. We need to go one piece at a time, right? So Asia
Yeah.
Pacific was one, Europe is next, Middle East Africa is of course coming up,
Okay.
and that is part of the future plans. And you've probably heard this from the ministers as well in the past that Africa is a focus for Canada, and there will be openings of different offices in Africa as well in the coming years, right? So that will be one of the bigger steps that we're going to take. The second thing that we need to keep in mind from an opportunity perspective is that we're seeing a lot of innovation and we're seeing evolving consumer trends. right? Innovation that are consumers looking for more protein, more fibers, cleaner labels, and they're looking, of course, for convenient format that fits their challenging lifestyles. So if you're looking at Asia Pacific, for example, you're looking for a higher demand of protein as diets are evolving over there. If you're looking at Europe, for example, you're looking at a strong focus on health, clean label, and functionality. And across all these regions, innovation is very, very important because consumers are looking at newer products with less processing and
Hmm.
less non-natural ingredients, right? If you allow me
Hmm.
to put it that way. So that is something very, very big. And we in Canada are known for having the inputs and also for processing without necessarily adding additives that are
Right.
not beneficial to health. The third thing that we're seeing as well is private label, right? It's a very, very, very big market and high growth market. Whether you look at Europe, you look at Latin America, you look at Asia Pacific, because of the fact that the consumer behavior is changing, the food cost is increasing, right? And the value of the product that you want to offer is very high, but you cannot pay for the label itself,
Right.
right? So the companies are saying, well, if I can get a better quality product, but use my own private label, then why not bring the two together and have more private label on shelves? And we've seen this trend in Canada itself, right? With
Oh,
the
yeah.
of the global market, just
Yeah.
in Canada, right? What we did not see on our shelves in our homes are
Hmm.
being seen a lot more. So we see more of the yellows or the whites or the reds that are
Yeah.
popping up more frequently on our shelves. So that is a very, very big trend right now. And I feel Canada, we're very well positioned because we're open to private label. We
Yeah.
have our brands. We would like to sell them, of course, there's no doubts about that. But we
Hmm.
are happy to enter any foreign market as long as we're able to scale and meet the higher demand. We are able to enter the foreign market on private label. So we should not discount that. And
Yeah.
many times companies say, well, it's a slippery slope when you go into private label because there will be a high volume, but you as a company will not be known necessarily
Right.
because your label is nowhere to be found. It's
Right.
as a company's label. So it is, it's a slippery slope. I completely agree, but it's the best way to penetrate the new
I know a
market.
lot of successful companies who are doing very well with private label.
Mhm.
They don't need to be known as long as they keep ordering your product. We know one who's had that same product on a certain airline for, I think, 15, 20 years.
Wow.
So it's, they know who they are, but everybody else loves their product, right? So do you need to have that label name on there? Not necessarily. This
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah, and it's questionable. Once you get to a certain scale, then you can probably diversify away a little bit from private label, and go
Hmm.
into putting your own brand on the shelves, and making that connection after. So it all makes sense. But if you want to enter a new market, your brand is not known in that market, right? You try to
Right.
sell a brand new brand in a mature market, for example,
Yeah.
doesn't work, it's not as easy. But if you can compete on the private label perspective, you can still go and capture a decent share of that market. So yeah, we've seen a lot of good success stories as well. And I'm not talking about North America, I'm talking about Asia Pacific, right? I'm talking about Europe. There has been some very interesting, success stories, like you said, that we should certainly not let go of this opportunity. And the fourth one that I'm seeing is where we need to invest a little bit more is automation and productivity.
Yeah.
And these are the two buckets that I'd say we've not in Canada been great in investing. Why is a big question that, there's multiple different versions of that answer. But why it's important to invest in automation and productivity, it is simply because it makes us a lot more competitive on the global scale. Competition is big. We are strategically positioned next to one of the highest consuming markets in the world. But if we want to access other markets, the distances to travel is a lot more, right? So from a transportation logistics perspective, we tend to lose. And what we
Hmm.
want to kind of bring it back is if you're more automated and more productive, your product cost is less, is lower. So even if
Right.
transportation and logistics will cost you higher, you will still be able to compete on the foreign market. So that is something that I highly, highly encourage companies to look into, is a longer term plan on how you can automate and you can increase productivity. So labor shortages, rising costs, all of those have minimal impact on your company, and you're still able to tackle the foreign market at a reasonable price and be competitive on a global scale.
Yeah, because how can we take over some of the Caribbean market where really it's only the US they're getting their products from, right? And now with all these higher tariff costs and trade, like that's an opportunity there a bit. We're not that far, but it's the logistics cost, it's the
Exactly.
transportation cost that, make it expensive. So
Yeah.
there are closer opportunities. I know a few companies are trying to figure out a way, to be able to supply the Caribbean as well.
Yeah. And it's a question of being agile, right? Sometimes if one market doesn't work and you're like Caribbeans, right? It's a regroupment of so many countries, right?
Yeah.
And you might not be everywhere, but you might be strategically positioned in a few markets only, and eventually your product keeps on growing in different markets after. So yeah, so there is, there's this trend that I am seeing more and more is companies are interested, right,
Hmm.
for a market, but where they're losing and in most of the situations is from a pricing perspective, and second is from a logistics perspective, right? So
Hmm.
those are two things that the companies need to work on a little bit more. But no doubt, quality of Canadian products, one of the toughest in the world, right? Brand knowledge and having the Canadian maple leaf just on your package is one of the biggest seller points, right? Because like you put that on, your products are gone off the shelf very, very quickly.
Yeah.
There are a few things, and this is part of our journey, right? So you have to continue investing a little bit more, year after year, and you get the benefits of it over the longer term.
Right. Wonderful. Kevin, you have one last question before we end up? I
Yeah.
think our time is going quickly. This is a great
Yeah, just
conversation.
thinking about Canadian food and beverage manufacturers, if they've got the knowledge and they sort of identified the market that they want to go into, how do they go about making connections with the buyers in those countries? Do some of them have Canadian agents? Do they go to food shows like Seattle and Montreal or Paris or Toronto, or do they go to the country directly and just tour around and meet with your staff in those countries? Like, what's the best sort of way for them to make connections with the buyers once they've identified that Portugal is the right market for them or something?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Kevin. And again, I'll go through the journey once again, right? And this is all about how does the company see itself tackling that market? If you want to have a good sense of the foreign market, the best is for you to go and visit that market and understand the landscape, meet with the Trade Commission Service, meet with us. Provincial delegations are there as well in some situations. So that could be one of the avenues is meeting with your Canadian government, federal or provincial staff that is in that country can help you have a better sense and also have a list of who are the potential buyers for your product, right? So that could be one of the steps. The second step, trade shows, and I'm happy you mentioned them because trade shows for me are the space where you can actually assess what the quality of your product is and what the demand of your product is and who are the potential buyers interested. I've been to Seattle for the last many years. I've been to a couple of a few international trade shows as well. And whenever I'm there with Canadian companies, you can actually see the conversation that happens is if you're a buyer that stops by one of their booths, like, okay, tell me what's missing, right? What is it that my product does not have that you have elsewhere that can actually make you buy mine over the others, right? And that conversation is critical because you're able to do an assessment very, very quickly, very briefly on what does the product demand looks like. And all of these, there is a program at the federal level, and I'm sure some provincial ministers offer this as well, is the Can Export. The Can Export program, which is run by the Trade Commission Service, can help you actually reduce your cost of attending different trade shows when you're in market exploration. when you're looking at different markets and you want to, go to a trade show that you've never been to, CanExport can actually subsidize some of that cost. So it can help you from a cost perspective also be present, but with less out of your pockets. So I'd say that that is the trade shows are the second avenue. The third avenue, when it comes to introduction to foreign buyers. So we maintain a book of foreign buyers, and we are in touch with them quite often. And the reason why we do this is because we want to break that gap between a Canadian company, a Canadian exporter, and a foreign buyer that don't know each other. We want to be the middleman, basically, right? Is getting them connected. But it all comes with some of the requirements from the foreign buyers. They tell us these are types of companies we're looking for. These are the SKUs that I'm looking to replace. These are the products that I'm looking to replace. This is what I'm competing for. Let's try to see what Canada has to offer. And we go to our database and we try to, of course, pull that out and see who are the Canadian companies that meet these requirements. And then we start bridging between the two and we start doing the introductions. So that can be another avenue as well. So it varies from the type of company, from where the company is in their exporting journey and what they're targeting for. That basically helps us determine which avenue would work the best for every company. The last that I want to do is to put a Canadian company in touch with a foreign buyer. The Canadian company is unable to meet their requirements, and the foreign buyer spent a few months working with them, unable to finalize the contract. And that's not a good reputation for the Canadian company and neither for EDC, right? So we need to be mindful of that. And that's why we work with specific requirements given to us by the foreign buyers.
Wow, this has been this is a wealth of information. It's been a gold mine. I've always known of EDC. I've had conversations with them, but it's good to get down, I think, to some of the nitty-gritty points of what you actually offer and what some of the processes are. Like, it's not easy, right? It's not for the faint of heart, I don't think, to necessarily start, but at least we have a starting place for the journey to begin. You
For
know.
sure, yeah, and feel free, call us. Like I tell everyone, if you don't know what to do, where to go, or if you do know where to go and what to do, even then, call us, right? And there is, our export engagement team, which
Hmm.
is very helpful, beneficial to all the companies whenever you have any questions. Or any things that are running by your mind, you don't know necessarily where to go or how to navigate those, call us, right? Our advisors are there. They're going to help you and they're going to look at what is doable. And if it's not us, like I said, it's an ecosystem, right?
Right.
Work with all the partners. We're great at some things. We're not so great at others, right? So we hand that over, leave that to some other people, and we work in partnership with a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, sorry, that can help the companies grow internationally.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions that we'll have to field your way after this webinar launches on Thursday. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the conversation, the honesty, the candidness of what it takes to become export ready. And I think your group is doing a great job in helping Canadians establish ourselves worldwide. We have a great reputation. So I think the trends coming up as well. Great insights there on how the consumer palate's changing. Trends are in the Middle East. Sorry, the middle class is moving up, and there are different demands for the different types of foods that they're looking for. So I think we've got some really good information. Overall, during our hour went by so quick. Kevin, any closing remarks there?
No, thank you. As Jen said, a wealth of information that I think will help all of the food and beverage manufacturers figure out how they can engage with the foreign markets.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Zeeshan. This has been a
my
great
pleasure.
discussion and was wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.
Bye bye.